Been working on this now for a year and a half or so. Includes the Advocacy Centre for Tenants Ontario, a lot of other community groups, St. Christopher House, policy advisors, and the Association for Communities Organized for Reform Now, ACORN, is there. And I'd like to acknowledge Edward Lance from that group who's here today, and if any of the press want to speak to him, he's willing to talk about what it would mean to their members if inclusionary housing was passed. The problem is not that we aren't building housing in the province and in the City of Toronto. Over the last decade, there's been over 100,000 units of new housing built in the Toronto area, but almost none of them have been affordable to people of average incomes. Less than 3,000 units in the City of Toronto have been built for people that would be affordable to people of average incomes. There's a significant gap between the earning power of average families in Toronto's and the income required to purchase or rent the new housing that is coming on stream. The average family in Toronto is making around $50,000 a year in order to get even sort of the cheapest of the sort of two-bedroom apartments and townhouses. You require an income of about $75,000 a year in order to purchase. So there's this significant gap between the earning power and the incomes required to purchase or to rent. And as a result, average families are being forced into one of three situations. They're either living in overcrowded or substandard accommodation in an ever-shrinking affordable rental and resale market, or they're moving to the outer suburbs and facing longer commute times and adding to the transportation problems of the city, or they're spending larger and larger proportions of their income on housing. All these trends have been very well verified. David Helchansky of the City Centre has done significant work on tracking the polarization of the city between the downtown core and the suburbs, and food banks are showing an alarming increase in the number of families who use their services where at least one of the people in the family is holding down a full-time job. It's something that is quite shocking, actually, to see in the last decade. The number of people where somebody holding down a full-time job, the family is still required to use the food banks, and it's largely because they're spending 50, 60, 70, 80% of their income in order to keep a roof over their heads. Inclusionary housing programs can help to reverse this trend. In these programs, as Ken has mentioned, developers are required to provide a portion of new developments at a cost that is affordable to families making average incomes. In return, developers receive cost offsets that make sure that they are able to continue to see a reasonable return on their investment. I want to emphasize that this is a tool with proven success. As Cheri mentioned, hundreds of municipalities in the United States use it, and in those municipalities, development continues. It doesn't decrease. Housing prices do not increase as a result of inclusionary housing. It's a tool that appears to be, when properly implemented, a win-win for everybody. And the results are mixed income communities that have proven benefits for everyone, people who provide the important services in the community like teachers, hospital workers, service industry workers can afford to live in the communities that where they work. Children can afford to live in the communities that they grew up in. We're beginning to see actually the reverse empty nest syndrome now, because children are not able to afford to leave the family home, particularly if they want to continue to live in the communities that they grew up in. Affordable housing is part of all of the developments, and it helps to reduce NIMBYism. An affordable rental can be increased by partnering with the nonprofit sector. Inclusionary housing, we want to emphasize, is not a magic bullet, and it will not in and of itself solve the affordable housing problems. It is not a replacement for other kinds of social housing and income support programs. However, it is a tool that can increase the supply of affordable housing for a portion of the population that is not reached by other kinds of programs. And it does not require massive government investment to create this housing. By using municipal regulation, planning, and development processes, Incentives can be generated that allow private developers to provide affordable housing and still maintain a reasonable return on investment. And as Ken has mentioned, it's clear that municipalities need the explicit authority to create such programs, and that's why it's very important that Ms. DiNovo's bill is going forward today. We hope that all members of the legislature will support it, that it can move forward to the committee process and to public hearings, and that we can have a real public discussion about the importance of this kind of tool. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Just to add a little bit to what Brian said, people are aware, certainly in the Toronto area, the St. Lawrence area. The St. Lawrence area was really, in a sense, an inclusionary zoning development before its time in the 1970s. There you have co-op housing, there you have affordable housing mixed in with market prices. You'd be hard-pressed to tell the difference between what is the affordable housing and what's not. It's a wonderful neighborhood. It's worked extremely well and is really a model. And also, I want to say inclusionary zoning and inclusionary housing is not a partisan issue either. This is supported from left to right on the political spectrum across municipalities across Ontario. And again, one of the joys of this in a time when governments are running huge deficits is it doesn't cost a tax dollar and yet still provides affordable housing units. So moving from inclusionary zoning to another issue that we're facing in Ontario that affects our housing what do you do when you are able to buy a new home or a new condo and you find out that it's not up to par, that you have a problem with your developer, where do you go? The answer right now is Tarion. We found that Tarion doesn't